what the most important decision of your life looked, at first, like just another Tuesday. Jack Stone had flown the same cargo route for 6 years, and every run felt the same. Load up, jump, unload, get paid, repeat. His ship, the Lucky Star, was a rust-streaked freighter held together with stubbornness and spare parts. Tonight she rattled to the Kesson Drift, hauling a shipment of refined or toward the outer colonies, and Jack was halfway through a cold cup of synth coffee when his console chimed with something he hadn't heard in years, an emergency beacon. He sat up straight. Most pilots learned to ignore those. Distress calls in the drift were notorious bait, used by pirates to lure cargo haulers into ambushes. The smart move was to log the signal, report it to the nearest patrol station, and keep flying. Jack knew that. He'd been told that. He'd told himself that more than once, watching other ships answer calls and never reach their destinations. But something about this signal was different. The distress beacon wasn't broadcasting the usual panicked, garbled mess of a freighter in trouble. It was structured, layered, almost musical, frequencies stacked on frequencies, like 4 separate voices trying to speak as one. Jack frowned at his readout. He'd flown long enough to recognize when something didn't fit a pattern, and this signal didn't fit any pattern he knew. He pulled up the source. A ship, sleek, alien, and badly damaged, drifting just outside a debris field 200 kilometers off his current heading. Its hull markings didn't match any registry in his database. Luxury class design, by the look of the curves and the now shattered viewing ports. Whoever built that ship hadn't built it to survive what had clearly torn through its side. Jack's hand hovered over the comm panel. Every practical bone in his body told him to fly on. He had a delivery schedule. He had a ship that could barely handle a hard landing, let alone a rescue operation. He had no weapons to speak of, just a Lucky Star's outdated point defense turret, and a lot of optimism. And yet, he thought about all the times he'd wished someone would answer when things went wrong for him. The lean years after his parents passed, the patrol stations that never had time for a nobody cargo runner, the long nights drifting alone with nothing but static for company. Somewhere out there, someone was sending a signal that screamed, "Please, someone hear me." And Jack Stone, against every rule of survival he'd ever learned, decided he would be the one who heard it. "Lucky Star, diverting course," he said aloud to no one, flipping the comm to broadcast. "This is cargo vessel Lucky Star, responding to your distress signal. Hold tight. I'm coming in." The ship groaned as he banked hard, or containers shifting audibly in a hole behind him. As he approached, the wreck came into sharper focus on his viewport, and his stomach tightened. This wasn't pirate bait. The damage was real. Scorch marks along the hull, weapons fire that had punched clean through outer plating, life support flickering visibly through cracked viewports. Whatever had attacked the ship had wanted whoever, or whatever, was inside dead. He angled the Lucky Star alongside the wreck and extended a docking tube, hand steady despite the hammering in his chest. Through the tube's small window, he caught his first glimpse of the interior. A dim corridor, sparks raining from a broken conduit. At the far end, for cylindrical pods glowing faintly with the unmistakable blue-white shimmer of stasis fields. Stasis pods. Someone or somethings was still alive in there. Jack grabbed his toolkit and a borrowed sidearm he barely knew how to use, and pulled himself through the docking tube into the wreck. The air inside was thin and acrid with the smell of burnt circuitry. He moved carefully past debris and sparking conduits, his flashlight beam sweeping across walls etched with symbols he didn't recognize, elegant, looping script that seemed to belong to no single culture he'd ever encountered. He reached the first pod and wiped frost from its viewing panel. Inside, suspended in pale blue light, was a being unlike anything he'd ever seen, a humanoid figure with skin like faceted crystal, refracting his flashlight into 100 tiny rainbows across the chamber walls. The pod status display blinked red. Failing, his pulse spiked. 3 more pods stood beyond it, each holding something equally impossible, a willowy figure wreathed in living vines and pulsing green light, a shape that seemed to be made of shifting, captured starlight, and a final pod containing what looked like liquid metal, slowly swirling even in stasis. For alien beings, for failing pods, and somewhere on this ship, or closing in from outside, whoever had done this damage in the first place. Jack's radar chirped a warning, just as he reached for the first pod's release mechanism. 3 ships had dropped out of warp less than a minute away, and they weren't broadcasting friendly IDs. He had seconds to decide. He hit the release. The crystal being's pod hissed open, mist pouring out as the figure's eyes faceted, glowing faintly violet. Open for the first time in what might have been years. It looked at Jack, taking in his patched flight suit and unremarkable human face, and spoke in a voice like chimes ringing through glass. "You answered," it said, as though that single fact astonished it more than anything else that had happened to it that day. "Out of everyone in this sector, you answered." Outside, the pirate ships were closing fast. Jack didn't have time to wonder what the being meant. He only knew one thing for certain. He'd made his choice the moment he diverted course, and there was no taking it back now. "We need to move," Jack said, already reaching for the second pod. "Whatever you are, can you walk?" The crystal being's faceted eyes caught the emergency lights, scattering them into 1,000 colors across the corridor. "Faster than you believe," it said. "But first, we need to wake the others. All of us or none of us survive this." And as Jack's hands moved to the second pod, he had no idea that this single act of kindness, answering a call that anyone else would have ignored, was about to unravel everything he thought he knew about his place in the galaxy. Have you ever made a decision in 5 seconds that would define the rest of your life? Jack Stone was about to. The second pod released with a hiss of escaping coolant, and the plant-like being inside unfurled like a flower finding sunlight after a long winter. Vines that doubled as limbs flexed experimentally, and twin eyes, luminous green, set in a face woven from living bark and leaf, blinked open and focused on Jack with startling clarity. "Pirates!" the being said immediately, without preamble, its voice a rustle of leaves layered with something deeper, almost musical. 3 ships. Closing. We have 90 seconds. Human. You can sense them? Jack asked, already moving to the third pod. "I can sense everything alive within a kilometer," the plant being replied, stepping out on legs that bent like young saplings. "And right now, the only thing standing between 4 trapped diplomats and an Voloth hunting squad is you. So I would suggest you move faster." Jack didn't need telling twice. He cracked the third pod, and light, actual captured starlight, poured out as the third being uncoiled itself from stasis. It had no fixed shape, shifting between humanoid outline and pure radiant energy, gravity itself seeming to bend faintly around it. When it spoke, the words seemed to come from everywhere in the corridor at once. "Pilot," it said, "your vessel, is it capable of faster-than-light retreat?" "She's old, but she's got legs," Jack said, sweat beading on his forehead as he moved the 4th and final pod. "Listen, I don't know any of you are or why someone wants you dead, but I got a docking tube back to my ship and pirates incoming. We talk logistics on the way." The 4th pod was the trickiest. Its locking mechanism had partially melted in whatever attack had crippled this ship. Jack's hands worked fast, prying the housing with multi-tool, while the liquid metal being inside watched him through the cracked viewport with eyes that seemed to ripple like mercury. "Allow me," said the crystal being, and pressed 2 fingers against the damaged lock. Light arced from its fingertips, and the housing released with a soft click. The 4th pod opened, and the liquid metal entity flowed out. Literally flowed, its form rippling and reshaping until it settled into something approximately humanoid, silver, and seamless, reflecting the corridor's red emergency, lighting like a moving mirror. "4," it said, voice smooth and layered, like multiple tones speaking in perfect unison. "We are all accounted for. Pilot, your name?" "Jack. Jack Stone. We can do introductions later. Right now we run." They ran, the wrecked ship growing around them as they sprinted back toward the docking tube. Jack in the lead with his flashlight, cutting through smoke and sparking debris. Behind him, he could hear the pirate ships now, the distinct shriek of weapons charging, audible even through hull plating, far too close for comfort. They reached the Lucky Star with seconds to spare. Jack practically threw the 4 aliens through the airlock, sealed the docking tube, and scrambled to the cockpit, heart hammering against his ribs. Through the viewport, 3 pirate vessels had closed to point-blank range, weapons array glowing an angry red as they prepared to fire on the wreck. And on him, "Hold on to something!" he shouted back to the cabin, slamming the thrusters to full power. The Lucky Star lurched forward just as the lead pirate ship opened fire. The shot meant for the abandoned wreck instead clipped the Lucky Star's rear stabilizer, throwing the whole ship into a spin. Alarm screamed. Jack fought the controls, knuckles white, as a second shot streaked past close enough to rattle his teeth. "Pilot!" came the energy being's voice from behind him, eerily calm amid the chaos. "Your engines are operating at 63% efficiency. Allow me." Before Jack could ask what that meant, he felt it. A surge of raw power flooding through the ship's systems, the engine readout spiking past their rated maximum without so much as a flicker of strain. The Lucky Star, somehow, found another gear she'd never had in 6 years of service. Hull integrity compromised, aft section. The liquid metal being said next, already moving, flowing really toward the damaged stabilizer. Its form spread thin and poured itself into the cracks in the hull plating, hardening instantly into a seamless patch that stopped the hull breach cold. Sensors are blind in the debris field, the crystal being added, pressing its palm flat against the console. Jack's readout sharpened immediately, resolving chaotic field of rocks and pirate ships into a clean tactical map he could actually navigate. "And I," said the plant-like being, settling its vine-wrapped hands against an exposed conduit near the engine core, "will keep this ship from falling apart while you fly us out of here." Jack stared at a suddenly transformed cockpit, engines roaring at impossible output, sensors crystal clear, hull patched, structural integrity stabilized, and felt something between disbelief and exhilaration. "Okay," he muttered, gripping the controls. "Okay, let's see what she can really do." He threaded the Lucky Star through the debris field at a speed that should have torn her apart. Pirate fire chasing every maneuver, asteroid fragments flashing past a viewport close enough to count. Behind him, for alien beings he'd known for less than 10 minutes, worked in perfect, silent coordination, each one compensating for exactly what the ship and Jack needed most. It shouldn't have worked. By every rule Jack knew about flying, it shouldn't have worked. But as the debris field thinned and the jump-capable open space of the drift opened up ahead, Jack hit the throttle and the Lucky Star screamed into a hard burn, leaving the pirate ship scrambling in their wake. He didn't breathe again until the jump drive spun up and the stars outside smeared into the comforting blur of FTL travel. Silence settled over the cockpit. Jack turned in his seat, finally getting a proper look at the four beings who would just save his ship as surely as he'd save their lives. "Okay," he said, voice still shaking with adrenaline. "Who exactly are you people, and why does someone want you dead badly enough to chase a beat-up cargo hauler across a debris field?" The four exchanged a glance, crystal, plant energy, and liquid metal, for impossible being standing in his cramped cargo hold. And the crystal being finally answered, its faceted face unreadable but its voice gentle. "That Jack Stone," it said, "is a much longer story, and it begins with the fact that you are about to become the most important human in galactic history. What does it feel like to discover that an ordinary act of kindness has made you the center of a 4,000-year-old conflict?" Jack was about to find out. He sat across from his four guests in the Lucky Star's cramped common area, a space barely big enough for 5 of them, nursing a cup of synth coffee that had long since gone cold. None of them had eaten. He wasn't even sure they could, but they'd accepted his offer of seats, more out of courtesy, he suspected, than need. "Start from the beginning," Jack said. "Who are you? Who attacked your ship? And why does whoever was want you dead?" The crystal being inclined its head. "I am Lyra of the Cetrian Conclave," it said. "My companions are Vesh," it gestured to the plant being, "of the Loran Bloom Ward. Core," indicating the shifting light form, "of the Aurelian Continuum. And Mira," nodding to the liquid metal entity, "of the Cythery Depths. For different species," Jack said slowly, "on one ship. For different species who've been at war, in various configurations, for over 300 years. Vesh said, Vines shifting thoughtfully. "Our peoples occupy the 4 major star clusters bordering this region of the galaxy. The Cetrians mine crystal-based technology unmatched anywhere. The Loran cultivate biotech that could heal entire worlds. The Aurelians harness energy beyond anything your science has theorized. And the Cythery," Myra's silver form rippled, "the Cythery build what no one else can, adaptive infrastructure capable of rebuilding shattered civilizations. Each of our peoples holds something the others desperately need. Kor added, voice resonating like distant thunder. And for 3 centuries, instead of trading, we have fought. Resource wars, border skirmishes, assassinations dressed as accidents. An entire generation has grown up knowing nothing but conflict. Jack set down his coffee. So what changed? 6 months ago, Lyra said. Leadership from all 4 civilizations secretly agreed to attempt something unprecedented. A peace summit, hosted in neutral space, negotiated not by career diplomats, but by representatives chosen specifically for their open-mindedness. We 4 were selected. We were transported under heavy secrecy toward the summit location when our ship was ambushed. By who? Jack asked. We don't fully know, Vesh admitted. Factions within all 4 civilizations benefit from continued war. Arms dealers, conquest-hungry generals, profiteers who lose everything if peace broke out. Any of them could have arranged the attack. Possibly more than one, working together. Our pilot and crew were killed in the first strike, Mira said, voice quieter now. We barely had time to seal ourselves into the stasis pods before the ship lost power completely. We drifted, unable to call for help on any frequency that could be traced back to our governments, for nearly 2 weeks before our pods finally triggered an automated distress beacon as a last resort. A beacon almost no one would risk answering, Kor added, because pirates in this sector use false distress calls as bait. Every analysis we ran predicted we would die in those pods. Rescue probability, under 3%. Jack felt the weight of that settle over him, and I answered anyway. You answered anyway, Lyra said softly, not because you were ordered to or paid to, or because you calculated good odds. You answered because somewhere out there you believe someone might be in trouble and worth saving, even at the risk of your own life. Jack, in 300 years of conflict, do you understand how rare that instinct has become among our people? We have leaders who calculate, who negotiate, who weigh costs and benefits before lifting a single finger. You didn't weigh anything. You just went. Jack laughed, a little uncomfortably. I almost didn't. I sat there for a solid minute talking myself out of it. And yet you came, Vesh said, that hesitation and the choice you made despite it, that is exactly the quality our civilizations have lost. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Jack Stone. It's choosing rightly in spite of it. Okay, Jack said, rubbing his temples. I appreciate the philosophy lesson, but I'm still just a cargo pilot with one banged-up ship. I can't fix a 300-year war. What do you actually need from me? The 4 aliens exchanged another glance. This one waited with something Jack couldn't quite read. We need to reach the summit location, Kor said finally. Without our original ship, without a traceable transport, and without alerting whoever orchestrated the attack that we survived. If our enemies learn we're still alive, they will try again, and next time they may succeed. And you wanted to fly you there. In this thing. Jack gestured around the cramped, rattling hold of the lucky star. An unremarkable cargo hauler is precisely what we need, Lyra said. No one hunting for missing diplomats would think to search a routine freighter. You are, quite literally, the perfect disguise, and the only pilot any of us trust after what you've already done for us. Jack sat back, processing the sheer scale of what was being asked. Somewhere out there, an entire galaxy's fate hinged on whether he agreed to keep flying, keep risking his ship, his cargo contracts, his entire ordinary life, for 4 strangers he'd known for less than an hour. If I say yes, he said slowly, and we actually pull this off, what happens to me afterward? I go back to hauling, and pretend none of this happened. Vesh's leaf-woven face shifted into something like a smile. Jack Stone, I don't believe you understand yet just how much you've already changed. There is no going back to who you were an hour ago. The only question now is what you choose to become. Jack looked at the 4 of them, crystal, plant, energy, liquid metal, each one watching him with an intensity that made his chest tight, and felt the truth of Vesh's words settle into his bones. Whatever happened next, there was no version of his life that didn't now include this moment, this choice, this impossible group of strangers who had somehow made him matter. All right, he said finally, setting his jaw, where's the summit, and how fast can the lucky star get us there? Lyra's faceted eyes caught the cabin light. scattering it warmly across the small room. Faster, I suspect, than you've ever flown in your life. Because from this point forward, Jack, every second counts. What happens when 4 advanced civilizations worth of enemies all decide, independently, that you need to disappear? Jack Stone was about to find out the hard way. The plan was simple in theory. Navigate the Lucky Star through 3 jump corridors to reach the neutral system hosting the Peace Summit, avoiding any registered checkpoints where someone might flag 4 missing alien diplomats traveling on an unremarkable cargo ship. In practice, the galaxy had other ideas. They were 2 jumps, and when Core's energy form flickered with sudden urgency. Pilot, sensor contact, 6 minutes out. Configuration matches Voloth hunting vessels, the same group from Iraq. They tracked us, Jack said, already adjusting course. Unlikely through conventional means, Mira said, her liquid metal form rippling thoughtfully. More probable. Someone within the summit security apparatus leaked our survival. This was not a coincidental encounter. Great. A mole. Jack banked the Lucky Star hard toward a nearby asteroid cluster, hoping the rock formations would mask their signature. Vesh, how's the hull holding up from last time? Patched, but not perfect. Vesh said, vines flexing as it monitored a jury-rigged display Jack had cobbled together from spare parts. Another direct hit, and we lose the aft compartment entirely. Then we don't take a direct hit. Jack gritted his teeth and threaded the ship between 2 slowly tumbling asteroids, close enough that he heard debris ping off the outer hull. Behind them, the pursuing ships matched the maneuver with unsettling precision. They're gaining, Lyra said. Crystal fingers pressed against the console she'd rigged days earlier to feed her sensor data directly into the ship systems. Current trajectory puts them in weapons range in 90 seconds. Jack's mind raced. The Lucky Star had no real weapons, no shields worth mentioning, and nowhere near the speed to outrun dedicated hunting vessels in open space. Core, how much more can you push the engines without blowing them out? I've already exceeded safe operating parameters by 40%, Core said. I can push further, but I cannot guarantee the engines survive the strain. And if they fail mid-burn, we lose all power, including life support. Do it anyway, Jack said. If we get caught, we lose everything regardless. Mira, I need you to reinforce the aft hull as much as you can spare. Vesh, watch every system for failure signs and tell me the second something's about to break. The 4 aliens moved with the same eerie, practice coordination Jack had seen during their first escape. Except now there was real fear underlying it, a tension he could feel even without their abilities. Core's light form blazed brighter, pouring energy into the straining engines. Mira flowed across the aft hull, thinning herself dangerously to cover more surface area. Lyra's sensors painted a constantly shifting tactical picture across Jack's console, and Vesh monitored every readout with vine-wrapped hands trembling against the controls. The Lucky Star surged forward, engines screaming at a pitch Jack had never heard from her before, and for a moment, just a moment, he thought they might actually pull ahead. Then the first shot hit. It clipped the outer hull, not the reinforced section, throwing the ship into a violent shudder. Alarms blared. Jack fought the controls as the Lucky Star spun, fire trailing from a ruptured conduit near the cargo hold. Hull breach. Secondary compartment. Vesh shouted. I'm on it, Mira said, already flowing toward the breach, her form stretching impossibly thin as she poured herself into the gap. Jack hauled the ship back level just as a second shot streaked past, close enough to rattle every loose panel in the cockpit. Lyra, I need a way out of this now. Lyra's faceted eyes narrowed in concentration, sensor data flooding across her makeshift interface. There! A gravity well, 11 o'clock, generated by a dead moon fragment. If you can thread us through its outer edge, the gravitational distortion should scatter their targeting systems long enough for us to break contact. That's a hell of a should, Jack muttered, already committing to the turn. It is the only option with survival probability above 20%, Lyra said simply. Jack didn't ask what the other options looked like. He threw the Lucky Star into the steepest dive she'd ever attempted, the gravity well yanking at the ship's frame with bone-rattling force as warning lights bloomed across every console. Behind them, the pursuing ship's weapons fire scattered wildly off target, their targeting systems thrown into chaos by the same gravitational distortion Jack was fighting to control. For 3 agonizing seconds, the Lucky Star hung on the edge of the well, caught between the pull threatening to crush her and the inertia trying to fling her free. Then, with a final shuddering lurch, she broke loose, flung outward at a speed that pinned Jack hard against the seat, the pursuing ships falling rapidly behind, their own approach vectors thrown hopelessly off course by the same distortion. Silence fell to the cockpit, broken only by the ship's overworked systems ticking as they cooled. "Pursuit has lost contact," Lyra said finally, something like relief threading through her chiming voice. Jack exhaled, hands shaking on the controls. "Everybody's still in one piece." "Structurally compromised, but functional," Mira said, her form slowly reforming into something more solid as she withdrew from the patched hull breach. "Engines at the edge of failure, but holding," Core added, dimming slightly from strain. "And you, Jack?" Vesh asked, genuine concern coloring its rustling voice. That maneuver would have tested even our most skilled pilots. Jack managed a tired, slightly disbelieving laugh. "I have absolutely no idea how I just did that. I think I just flew on instinct and hoped really hard. That," Lyra said quietly, "is precisely the quality we keep telling you matters most. Calculation alone would never have found that gravity well in time. Instinct did." Jack looked out at the stars ahead. The immediate danger past, but the weight of everything still resting on his shoulders. How much further to the summit? 1 jump remaining, Core said. "Assuming the engines survive long enough to make it." "They will," Jack said, with more confidence than he entirely felt. "She's a stubborn old ship. We've come this far together. We're not stopping now." As he set the final course, Jack allowed himself, for just a moment, to feel something unexpected beneath the exhaustion and adrenaline, a strange, growing certainty that whatever waited for him at the summit, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Have you ever walked into a room knowing that what happens next will be remembered for centuries? Jack Stone had never felt more out of place, or more certain he belonged. The neutral system hosting the Peace Summit turned out to be an ancient, abandoned space station drifting at the edge of contested territory. Chosen, Lyra explained, precisely because no single civilization held a claim to it. As the Lucky Star limped into the station's modest docking bay, battered but intact, Jack felt the enormity of the moment settle over him for the first time since this entire ordeal began. Security forces from all 4 civilizations met them at the airlock, armed, tense, and visibly stunned to see their missing diplomats alive. Word spread through the station within minutes. The 4 representatives, presumed dead for nearly 3 weeks, had survived against impossible odds, rescued by a single unremarkable human cargo pilot. Jack found himself standing in a vast circular chamber an hour later, surrounded by representatives from civilizations whose names he'd never even heard a month earlier, while Lyra, Vesh, Core, and Mira recounted the attack, the rescue, and everything that followed. He felt distinctly out of his depth, a cargo hauler in patched coveralls standing among beings who controlled technologies and resources beyond his comprehension. "This human," Lyra said, gesturing toward Jack as her account concluded, answered a distress call that every rational calculation said he should have ignored. He risked his ship, his cargo, his livelihood, and his life. For strangers, for unknown beings, for no reward beyond the simple fact that we needed help. He did not negotiate, Vesh added. He did not calculate odds. He acted because it was right, and continued acting that way through every danger that followed. Murmurs rippled through the assembled diplomats, some skeptical, some intrigued, a few openly moved. A Valoth representative, tall, armored, clearly uncomfortable with the proceedings, finally spoke. "With respect, for lives saved by one fortunate encounter does not resolve 3 centuries of conflict. What exactly are you proposing?" "We are proposing," Core said, light form steady and resolute, "that humanity's qualities, the adaptability, the courage, the willingness to act despite uncertainty, represent exactly what our negotiations have lacked. Every attempt at peace among our 4 civilizations has failed because each side calculates first and trusts never. Jack Stone trusted a signal he had every reason to ignore, and that trust saved for lives that may yet save countless more. We propose," Mira continued, her silver form catching the chamber's light, that humanity be formally invited into these negotiations, not as a fifth warring party, but as a neutral bridge, a species with no stake in 300 years of grievances, capable of mediating where we cannot mediate ourselves. The chamber erupted into debate, dozens of voices rising at once. Objections, questions, cautious agreement, outright skepticism. Jack stood in the middle of it, feeling distinctly like a man watching his entire understanding of his place in the universe get rewritten in real time. It took hours of negotiation, but by the end of that long, exhausting session, something unprecedented had happened. Representatives from all four warring civilizations had agreed, for the first time in 3 centuries, to a framework for genuine peace talks. Talks that would include, at humanity's still undefined diplomatic level, input from Jack Stone himself, as the man whose actions had inadvertently catalyzed the entire process. Later that evening, station time, since evening meant little in deep space, Jack found himself alone in a quiet observation deck, staring out at unfamiliar stars, when Lyra found him. "You're troubled," she said, settling beside him, faceted form catching the starlight in soft fragments. "I'm a cargo pilot," Jack said quietly. "I deliver, or I fix my own engine when it breaks because I can't afford a mechanic. And today I just watched 4 civilizations debate whether humanity should help broker a peace treaty, partly because of something I did without even really thinking about it. Does that frighten you?" "Terrifies me," Jack admitted, managing a half-laugh. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just answered a distress call. And that," Lyra said gently, "is precisely why it matters so much. You did not seek power or recognition or a place in history. You sought only to help. That is rarer and more valuable than any of us truly understood until we met you." Jack glanced at her. "Can I ask you something? Back when this all started, you said something that I'd answered when almost no one would have. Was that really about the distress call, or was there something else going on?" Lyra's faceted eyes seemed to catch 1,000 small lights at once, and for a long moment she didn't answer. "There is something else," she admitted finally. "Something I suspect Vesh, Kor, and Mira have each been considering as well, though none of us have yet found a right moment to say it aloud." "That's not ominous at all," Jack said, only half joking. Lyra's expression, as much as a crystalline face could carry expression, softened into something Jack hadn't seen from her before. "Tomorrow," she said, after the formal session concludes, "I believe you'll understand completely. For now, simply know this, Jack Stone. Whatever destiny is unfolding around you, it began the moment you chose kindness over caution. And destiny, once chosen, rarely lets go quietly." She left him there, alone with the stars, and a growing sense that the most surprising part of this entire journey had not yet arrived. What would you do if saving 4 lives meant being asked to change yours forever, 4 times over? Jack Stone was about to find out, and no one could prepare him for it. The morning after the summit's first formal session, Jack was summoned to a private chamber aboard the station. Not for negotiations this time, but at the personal request of Lyra, Vesh, Kor, and Mira. He arrived expecting another briefing on diplomatic protocol. What he found instead left him speechless. The 4 aliens stood together, and something in their bearing told Jack immediately that this conversation would be unlike any other they'd had. "Jack," Lyra began, crystalline voice carrying unusual weight. "There's a tradition among the Cetrian conclave, ancient, sacred, rarely invoked. When one being risks everything, repeatedly and without hesitation, to protect another with no expectation of reward, it is recognized not merely as heroism, but as the deepest form of devotion our culture acknowledges. We call it a bonding act." Jack blinked. "Hey, what?" "In Cetrian tradition," Lyra continued, faceted face unreadable but voice gentle, "what you did, answering our call, risking your ship and your life again and again, is understood as an act of courtship. I know this concept is unfamiliar to your culture, but I have come to know you these past days, Jack Stone, and I find that tradition aligns with something genuine I feel. I am asking you to bond with me, to marry me, in terms your culture would recognize." Jack's jaw actually dropped. He opened his mouth to respond, but Vesh stepped forward before he could find words. The Deloran Bloom Ward hold a similar belief, Vesh said, vines rustling with something like nervous energy. One who nurtures and protects life without demanding anything in return is recognized as a partner worthy of permanent bonding. Jack, you repaired nothing of mine, yet you protected everything I am. I, too, wish to propose union. Jack started, but Kor's light form brightened, cutting gently across the room. Among the Aurelian continuum, Kor said, energy given freely, without calculation of cost, is the highest expression compatibility we recognize. You gave everything freely, Jack Stone, expecting nothing. I propose the same union Lyra and Vesh have offered. Jack turned, almost dizzy, toward Mira, half dreading and half expecting what came next. The Cythery depths value adaptability above all things, Mira said, silver form rippling thoughtfully. You adapted to 4 impossible strangers, an impossible crisis, and an impossible destiny, without ever breaking. I, too, wish to ask for your hand, by whatever tradition your people recognize such things. Silence filled the chamber. Jack stood frozen, staring at 4 alien beings, each one powerful, ancient by comparison to his own short human life, each one now looking at him with open, genuine hope, all for having just proposed marriage within the span of 2 minutes. He tried again and laughed, somewhat helplessly. I came here to fly cargo. I didn't sign up to become the center of an intergalactic peace summit, and I definitely didn't expect to get 4 marriage proposals in the same week. We understand this is overwhelming, Lyra said softly. We do not ask for an answer born of obligation. We ask only that you consider what your heart genuinely wants, free from the pressure of everything else surrounding this moment. Jack ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small chamber, mind racing through everything that happened. The distress call, the wreck, the desperate escape, the gravity well, the summit, and now this. Somewhere beneath the disbelief, he found himself genuinely considering the question rather than simply rejecting it outright. He thought of his old life, the cramped cockpit of the Lucky Star, the endless cargo runs, the quiet loneliness he'd never quite admitted to himself. And he thought of these past days, terrifying, exhausting, and somehow more vivid and meaningful than anything he'd experienced in years. I can't choose between you, he said finally, turning back to face them. Not because I don't care about each of you. I do, more than I expected to. But marrying one of you and not the others feels wrong, considering everything we've been through together. And honestly, I'm not sure choosing romance with any of you, right now, would be choosing it for the right reasons. I think I'd be choosing it because of gratitude and adrenaline, not because I truly know any of you yet, beyond a wreck and an escape and a summit. He saw something flicker across their expressions, disappointment perhaps, but also, he thought, understanding. What I can promise, he continued, is this. I'm not going back to my old life pretending none of this happened. Whatever role humanity ends up playing in these peace talks, I want to be part of it. Not because 4 marriage proposals overwhelm me into staying, but because I genuinely believe in what we're trying to build here. Maybe, given time, given a chance to actually know each of you beyond a crisis, something more might grow naturally. I won't rule that out, but I won't rush into it either, out of obligation or guilt. Lyra's facid face shifted into something that, after days of learning her expressions, Jack recognized as a smile. That, she said, is precisely the answer we should have expected from you. Calculated proposals built on gratitude would never have suited you. You chose honesty instead once again. For what it's worth, Vesh added, vines curling in something like quiet amusement. I believe all 4 of us respect that answer more than we would have respected acceptance. The negotiations ahead will take months, possibly years, Kor said. Time enough, perhaps, for hearts to settle and truths to reveal themselves naturally. And in the meantime, Mira added, her silver form catching the light warmly, we have an entire galaxy's piece to help build. There are worse ways to spend the time getting to know someone. Jack looked at the 4 of them. Crystal, plant energy, liquid metal, each one extraordinary, each one now bound in by far more than rescue and gratitude, and felt, for the first time since this entire impossible journey began, a genuine sense of peace settle over him. He'd answered a distress call expecting nothing more than another routine, if risky, rescue. Instead, he'd found 4 allies, sparked the beginning of a galactic peace process centuries in the making, and discover a possible future he never could have imagined for himself. The Lucky Star would need repairs. The peace talks would need time, patience, and probably more danger before they succeeded. And whatever grew between Jack and the 4 beings beside him would need to unfold honestly, at its own pace, free from the pressure of crisis and gratitude. But as Jack Stone looked out at the stars beyond the station, he understood, finally and completely, the truth at the heart of everything that had happened to him. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, answering a call that anyone else would have ignored, really could rewrite the fate of an entire galaxy. And sometimes the most extraordinary destinies begin with nothing more than the simple choice to help. The end.